Are we on the verge of what every buyer has been hoping for when it comes to the real estate market and every seller has been feeling with those longer days on market? I'm going to dive into the local real estate market report update for the Midlands of South Carolina, Lexington, Columbia, and Lake Murray. And then I'm going to dive back to this board here that explains where we were, where we've been, and where we can possibly be going. So that way you can decide if it's the right time to buy or sell. All right, again, so we're going to break down the local real estate market report right here for the Midlands of South Carolina, Lexington, Columbia, and Lake Murray. For those first time watching, right here in the middle of the month in September, we get the report compiling the data of what happened the month prior. So we're looking at August data. That way you can get a real good feeling of what's going on in the market to help you decide, is it the right time or the right time to buy or sell in this market? And as we dive through it, we get kicked off as always with new listings. How many new listings came on the market in the month of August? So we can see what's going on with sellers. And what we saw in August was 1,581 new listings that hit the market. This is up 11.2% from last year at the same time and up 12.2%. We've seen this number, as you can see, steadily climbing since last year when we were in this giant hole of inventory. And I'm going to talk about this more when I go back to the whiteboard in just a little bit here. So keep this in the back of your mind. Not telling you have homework, but you may have homework. Continuing on, pending sales. This is telling us how buyers are reacting in this market, right? This is current. I always talk about closed sales is the past. It's what happened in the past, what's closing this month. But pending sales is actively what's happening. What we see is 1,217 pendings in that month, up 14.9% from last year. So in that dip, which you'll see on that graph later, you saw where buyers dipped quite a bit as interest rates peak. We're starting to see that uptick of them again, especially as many of you have seen, interest rates start to come back down just a little bit here, preemptive to the Fed saying, hey, we planned, we didn't, but we plan next go around to drop interest rates. And so proactively mortgage interest rates did drop during that time. And we saw an influx of buyers come back in the market. And as you can see historically, going from July to August, this usually dips because of back to school. This happens every year in real estate, and it was way less this year, I can promise you that, where that back to school week, there's 2 weeks where honestly we're like, do I have a job anymore? Like, was it the lawsuit? Was it what's going on, right? And it's always back to school, where this year, as you can see, from July to August, it actually picked up, and I felt it. That drop that we felt post-school going back was very short-lived. It was maybe half a week, if maybe a week, and then all of a sudden the phone started ringing. Interest rates, I think, had a big factor in that, but you can see it in the numbers right here as I point this out. And as you can see, pending sales up 4.5% from last year. Continuing on, closed sales. Again, this is looking backwards at the past, right? New construction that went under contract 6 months ago, up to 30 days ago or less. And what we see is 1,170. That's down 6.2%. So quite different. But as I talked about, closed sales is going to react slower than pending sales because pending sales happens and then they close. Either way, still up 2.6 from last year at the same time. So we're seeing more buyers come back into the market than the dwindling down we saw last year with the interest rate spike. Rolling on to days on market till sell, 40 days on market, up 21.2% from last year. Now, with that said, as you can see, this is down from July. A little bit surprising to me to see that, as I've seen more homes sitting on the market longer, but obviously this is the factual data out there. Talked about how there's a lot of discrepancies though, because I have gotten out there showing this week where it's like, hey, we looked at homes that were 60 days in the market, to be 100% honest, and other homes in the first week, I got that call, hey, we're in a multi-offer, your client's considering. So we have that discrepancy. Now, I always tell people, with that said, we are very minority when it comes to multiple offer situations. I have not had a buyer in the recent, I would call it 2 months, that has personally been in a multi-offer situation. Most of them have not. Do they exist? Absolutely, but it's not the typical out there right now, just to put into perspective for our area, because again, I talk about this a lot, this is local. There are parts of the country where homes are taking a long time to sell. People are giving crazy money off the house. I promise you that. And there are other areas that have even less inventory in the market than ours, where they're literally still getting 30 offers when they go on the market. wide discrepancy. That's why you have to focus on the hyper local to your area, because every area around the country is different, and you can't blanket statement this on a national statement and mean it means the same thing across the area. Continuing on, median sales price. So if you remember last month, I talked about how this went to 0, and I said, let's see next month, because remember Greenville, theirs did this and then it went back up, where a lot of times we're the delay of Greenville. And as you can see here, 279, 258, which is up 1.6% from last year at the same time. So again, we did rebound. And as you can see, the Realtors Association that gives us go back and sometimes correct the data, and they actually moved it up from 0 to 0.1% as the data kind of corrects. I don't work behind the scenes creating this data. I just share it with you. But as you can see that, and still up 1.1% year over year. So still on that positive up. We did not revert to the negative. Continuing on, average sales price, 322,043. Up 1.3% from last year. Now, the amount this is up, obviously, as you can see, since January has dipped. So we're not quite at the levels we were at the beginning of the year, but we're still in that positive. Now, as you can see, year over year, still 3.9% there. As you can see, though, from July did dip back down. Now, last year, it was the same thing. And then it dips kind of back in September, and then kind of has its, obviously last year, October had a moment, kind of fluctuated around. So you can see this is normal for it to dip during this time of year. I talk about it, right? What is your average? You add them all up, divide. And oftentimes during summer, some of those higher dollar price homes sell, right? More homes on the lake go on the market. And so it drives that average price up. It doesn't mean that per se your house is worth less in winter than it is in summer. Just the averages across the board are higher. Either way, continuing on. Percent of list price received, 98.4%, which is down 0.6% from last year, right? Like I said, less and less of those multi-offers were still last year for quite some time. They hung on for a while, and we're seeing less and less of them, which you're seeing in this percent of list price received here, down 0.3% from last year. Now, again, go backwards in time. We'll talk about this more later, right? 97% back in that 2019 era. 2008, look at it, was all the way down to at 1.94%. So even though it's less, it's not drastic, I guess is the best way to put it. We're kind of going back to, dare I say, normal. Continuing on, housing affordability index. Index measures housing affordability for the region. An index of what we have, 102, means the median household income is 110% of what is necessary to qualify for the medium highest home under prevailing interest rate. Higher number means greater affordability. As you can see, this number is going up. As those interest rates come down, and as that median number month over month dips down just a little bit, it makes affordability greater. Now, I get it. A lot of people are like, Brandon, it is not affordable. I understand there are other factors that lean into affordability that this probably does not count into. The increase in grocery prices, the increase in gas prices, actually they dipped. It's an election here, so they went down quite a bit this last month. Either way, not going to get into that this episode. Maybe next episode we'll talk about elections and how they impact real estate markets. Either way, I understand there are more factors that weigh into affordability than this here, and obviously that's the pain point that a lot of people are talking about. But continuing on, inventory of homes for sale, 2,912. That's how many homes are out there if you're going to come down and take a look at it at the end of that month in August. Up 43.8%, right? Big jump. This is a number that a lot of people are talking about. But with that said, when you look at the graph down here, you can see what I'm talking about. It was ridiculous during 21 and 22. These numbers down here, as you can see, historical lows. Doesn't even show up on our graph this low. So we are kind of bringing back to, again, dare I say, normal. And I'm going to talk about this more when I lean back to the graph of what's really happened here, to not take things out of context and just circle this rise right here, this rise right here. Obviously, it was easy in the beginning to circle this drop right here and say, whoa, but let's talk about this further. Either way, the other way we paint this is rolls into the monthly supply of inventory. For those not familiar, this is how us as real estate agents determine if it's a buyer's market or a seller's market, right? So anytime you have 6 months worth of inventory, that is what we consider average as real estate agents. Anytime you have more than 6 months worth of inventory, that is when you are in your buyer's market, because at that point, the supply has exceeded the demand out there. Anytime you have less than 6 months worth of inventory, that is when you are in your seller's market because demand has exceeded the supply. As you can see right now, we sit at 2.7 months worth of inventory, up 42.1%, another drastic number, right? From 1.9 last year. Again, 1.9. We had times where it got below 1 month's worth of inventory, which is insanity. Not sustainable by any sense of the means. That's the best way to put it. Either way, 2.7 months worth of inventory right here in August. So we are still in that seller's market. All right, let's come back to this graph so you can understand where the real estate market has been, where we're at, and where we could potentially be headed so that you can better make that decision if it's the right time to buy or sell. And so what I did here is I wanted to give you that perspective of pre-pandemic because I think a lot of this here in the middle, while is great for clickbait, hyper-sensationalism, and views on YouTube, doesn't give us a good perspective of the market and created a lot of confusion. So let's go back to 2018, 2019 and compare directly to then so we can see what's going on now and then better help answer what the future may be. And so what I did is I broke down new listings and new pendings from 2018 all the way up to till today. And so also I broke down the current market trends and report that we just read at the same time in 2019, August, to get that direct side-by-side comparison. And so to give you an idea what actually happened during the pandemic. So historically, 2018-19, prior to the pandemic, we saw a slight increase every single year of pendings as well as listings. But as you can see, the spread back then was about 3,000 difference between new pendings and new listings year to year, creating a little bit of a spread in inventory and creating a slight increase in price, about a 5% year-over-year gain. 2019, about the same. We saw that increase and we saw that increase in listings. That was all pretty relative. 2020 happened. We all remember that time. The buyers did still continue to increase at just above that 1,000 rate. However, listings, partially due to supply chain, because the builders couldn't get inventory on the ground, but partially due to sellers saying, hold on for just a second, and buyers reacting faster, especially as interest rates started to decrease. And so you had this gap close down quite a bit in this section here, which started driving up the price as competitiveness rose. 2021, again, buyers continued to rise and sellers started to finally react. But you can still see that gap there is a lot less than it was 2018, 2019. So you were still compressing the inventory in that time. As interest rates begin to climb during that time, that's where we saw the decrease in buyers, down to 14,000, almost back to 2019, or actually past 2019 levels, almost to 2018 levels. At the same time, sellers started to see that window of opportunity that we all had during that time close out, and sellers started to kind of get back to normalcy, as you see, going back to that 16,000 mark. Then 23, and interest rates got any higher, and that's when really the buyers crashed down to less than what we were in 2018. Now, at the same accord, and this is what prevented prices from dropping during this crash here, was listings did as well. And so that inventory just opened up a little bit as we went back to this 3,000 mark spread that we had back then. So inventory opened up a little bit more. But again, because they stayed relative and didn't open that gap like we saw in 2008, where that listings increased and the buyers did not, it just brought things back to the level where we're at now. And so that's where we can compare exactly from August 2019 to August now. Back then, 2019, 50 days on market was what we saw average. If you remember from our market report, we're at 40 new listings. What did we see back then? 1620. If you remember from our market report, I told you might have homework, 1581, but I'll fill it in so you don't have to guess. And then new pendings, what we saw, 1217, which brought us to a monthly supply of inventory of 2.7. Look, I cheated, I used notes here. Total inventory at the time, 3,425. Now we sit at 2,912. So again, let me fill in these numbers here to give you an idea, because this is what we see in August, and I'll fill you in on the gaps of what it's slated to land at after the year is done based on these numbers. So right now, as far as new listings go, we sit at 12,253. And as far as new pendings go, 9,595. These numbers are slightly above where we were last year and slightly below 2018 levels. So what essentially happened, this came back to balance. This corrected here, but again, as I said, because of this spread here, which is still equal, didn't correct the pricing as many hoped. Now, the question becomes the future. What does this mean as far as the future? My crystal ball does not give me the answers. I wish it did. A lot of you reach out and they're like, Brandon, what do you think is gonna happen in 2026? And I bring out the crystal ball and it doesn't give me the answers. And my return time is over on Amazon, so unfortunately I'm stuck with a broken crystal ball and just some data and facts. But let me ask you this. When interest rates decrease, we saw this increase in buyers, and they say historically every % decrease in interest rates brings 1 million buyers back into market. Locally, we saw about 1,000 increase with those interest rates, and then, right, retrospectively, when they increased back up, we saw that decrease. So about 1,000, but outside of, I'm not gonna take things out of context. We get rid of this because I know there were things that held back listings. This spread here was less than this spread here, was less than this spread here that we're seeing now. So listings typically do not react at the same accord as buyers. Now, we already seen a slight decrease in interest rates since the peak. The Fed came out and said, hey, we are finally at the position over all the years to finally decrease interest rates for the first time in many years. Now, with that said, I'm not gonna confuse you here. Fed rate and mortgage rates are not the same. They're not. So just because the Fed rate drops doesn't mean that magically mortgage rates drop 0.5. That's not what I'm saying. But what the Fed is saying is the economy is in the direction that we can start doing this. So my question becomes, and this is how you can best answer that best time to buy and sell. If we see that continuation of decreased mortgage interest rates, like many have predicted going into next year, and it does drop, and we see this increase of buyers back into the market and listings don't stay, what happens to pricing? Again, my crystal ball doesn't give me all the answers. There's a lot of other factors that weigh into this. I completely understand that. But just looking at the raw data and history and forgetting about the hyper sensationalism and just comparing here to here, if interest rates decrease, what does that mean?